Your AI is only as smart as your documentation. How AI ready documentation improves accuracy, trust, and self service. I am Sheba and I'll be your host for today's session. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Maria Frintes, technical writer at SoftServe. So, Maria brings extensive experience in creating effective documentation that helps users navigate products with confidence. Throughout her career, she has worked on a variety of documentation projects, including user manuals, deployment guides, configuration documentation, onboarding experiences, and step by step tutorials. In recent years, she has been exploring how AI and automation can be integrated into documentation workflows in a meaningful way, helping technical writers improve efficiency while maintaining content quality and delivering better user experiences. Today, she'll share her insights on leveraging AI in technical writing and how documentation teams can adopt these technologies strategically to create greater value for both users and organization. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box and we'll address them towards the end of the session. With that, I'll hand it over to Maria. The stage is yours.
Hi all, and first of all, thank you for having me here today. So, as I just mentioned, my name is Maria, and I'm a technical writer at SoftServe with over 5 years of experience in writing different kinds of documentation and producing different user assistants. And today, I'd like to talk about the importance of proper documentation in scope of AI readiness. And let me actually start with a question. Have you ever asked an AI assistant something you knew the answer to and watched it get it wrong? Not a little wrong, some misunderstanding, but confidently completely wrong. I just give you a minute to write the answer in the chat. And if you work with documentation, I assume you probably seen it like a common problem. And if your organization has started using AI to power like a help center or a chatbot, you almost suddenly felt the embarrassment of that moment when a user comes back and says, your AI agent or your AI assistant told me to do that, and that broke everything. And now here is the thing most people do in the moment. They blame the AI. They tweak the model, they blame the model, they adjust the prompt, they upgrade to a new version or switch to the different AI tool. And sometimes that helps, like a little. But more often than not, the model isn't the problem. The documentation is. And that's what today's session is really about. Not AI technology, because there are like plenty of people better qualified than me to talk about that, right? And today, this is about the part that often gets skipped in the rush to deploy AI model, the knowledge underneath it, because your AI is only as smart as what it can read. And if what it can read is unclear, inconsistent, or like missing entirely, no amount of model sophistication is going to save you and your product. So let's talk about what it actually takes to make your documentation AI ready. And I want to give you just enough context on how AI systems actually work, right? Not a technical deep dive, I promise, just enough to understand why documentation quality matters so much. So most AI-powered help systems today use something called retrieval-augmented generation, right? And what that means in plain language is that when a user asks a question, the AI goes looking through your documentation for relevant content. Then it pulls the most relevant chunks of it and uses those chunks to construct an answer, appropriate answer. And the AI answer is only as good as what it retrieves, right? So what it retrieves depends entirely on what you've written as a technical writer, how you structure it, and how clearly it maps to the question being asked. And this creates three very specific, I would say, failure models that I see again and again. And the first one is ambiguous content, right? So content that could mean two different things depending on the context, like sentences like click the button to proceed. Which button in which state on which page is a dialogue or page button, so a human might figure it out from the context or check out the screenshot, right? And the AI retrieves the sentence and uses it literally. Then the second one is inconsistent structure. If you call the same feature, like user management, for example, in one article, and then in another it's account administration, the AI treats those as different things, right? Because named differently. And it might retrieve one when the user needs another. And the inconsistency that was maybe visible to human readers becomes a retrieval problem for AI. And then the third problem is missing context. Documentation written with the assumption that reader already knows something. The assumed knowledge lives in someone had or in important video or in depth knowledge. But it's not in the text. It's what's not there, it's missing. The AI simply cannot retrieve what isn't there. And in better case, it will hallucinate. But actually, that's the uncomfortable truth. All three of these problems existed in our documentation before AI, like long before. But we just didn't notice it wasn't that visible, right? AI now didn't create those problems, it just made them visible because when, for example, a confused user had to read like some confusing article, they will email support. One support ticket, right? And when AI assistants using the same confusing article to answer 1,000 queries via chatbot, you get 1,000 of wrong answers to 1,000 confused users. And the documentation failure is just suddenly amplified by the reach of AI. So now we got to a real question. What does it actually mean to make documentation AI ready? I want to make this concrete because I think the phrase gets thrown around a lot without a clear definition, right? We really hear it very, very often now. And to me, it comes down to three things: structured, searchable, and unambiguous. Let's take those one by one. So for me, structured means that your content is organized at the right level of granularity. Remember I said that AI retrieves chunks but not full pages. So the size of these chunks matters enormously. If your article tries to cover 10 things instead of one, the AI gets a chunk that covers 10 things and constructs a very confusing answer. And if each article covers one thing clearly, the retrieval is precise and the answer is accurate because it's not confused by like 10 different things, basically. And the practical rule here is that one article, one question answers. So if you find yourself writing and also a lot in the article, that's a sign that you might need to split it in some smaller pieces of content. Now, searchable. It means that AI can find the right content when it's needed. This is partially about metadata and tagging, but more fundamentally, it's also about whether your titles and headings, like basic things, reflect what users actually ask. For example, when users ask, how do I reset my password? And your article is titled like Account Security Settings, the AI may not retrieve it because it uses like completely different terms, especially if it's also written in such a way like the whole article and doesn't only contain simple keywords like password reset. So it just won't find it. And if the article is titled How to Reset Your Password, it will work immediately because it's simple. And the advice here is to title your articles the way your user asks you questions. and not the way the product or development team names features. And the last one is unambiguous. Is maybe the hardest one because it requires like total clarity. It means that every term is defined and used consistently. Every procedure has explicit prerequisites, and every article is complete enough to be understood without like reading something else first. There is no assumed context, no vague instructions, no see the section about. Because in a restrict chunks there is no section about. Your AI won't get it there. And now I want to be honest with you. At first, it might feel overwhelming, right? Most of us have documentation that was built over years in different tools by different people and with really different conventions. Nobody thought that from the very beginning and designed it for AI. It just evolved. So the classic question, how do you get from where you are to where you need to be? Let me tell you how it happened on one real project. A few years ago, I worked with a client who had a product with, I still find this number fascinating, 16 million active users worldwide. So 16 million people are using this product. And their entire onboarding and user education was video tutorials, like short one. Actually, they were pretty well produced, like really pretty videos. That's it, like videos and nothing else. No written documentation, no help center articles for users, no searchable knowledge base. So just videos. And now, for a while, this worked like reasonably well. The product was stable, the videos covered basics, and the support team handles the overflow, like or some like complex cases. But as user base grew, the support volume grew with it. And the help center was seeing like overwhelming number of repetitive queries. And the same questions over and over again from users who might watch video once and forgot or they needed a quick answer and they don't want to sit through like 5 minute or 10-minute tutorial. So the decision was simple. They decided to introduce a AI-powered assistant. The goal was to streamline support, reduce the load on the human team, and give users faster, more accurate answers. So, like a great goal, a very contemporary, the right goal, right? And there was only one problem. The AI had nothing to read from, right? No knowledge base. There was no written source of truth. No article it could read information from. No structured knowledge base to pull answers from. You can have the most sophisticated AI model in the world. Developers can build it. But if there is no documentation underneath it, it will either hallucinate answers or give users nothing useful. So before we could deploy the assistant meaningfully, we had to build the knowledge foundation from scratch. So we started by analyzing the support queries. What were users actually asking? What they were looking for? Then we categorize the most frequent questions and use those as a blueprint for our documentation structure. If every high frequency question became an article, every article was written to answer exactly that one question, clearly, completely in plain language, because it's also important. And we also had to make some decisions about the structure because the product was evolving quickly. We needed documentation that was easy to maintain. And here is where videos created a second problem that I don't want to cover up because videos are wonderful for first impressions, they're interactive and very educational, but they are super expensive to maintain. When UI changes, you have to re-record the video. When a workflow changes, you have to record the video. And when the product has releases every 2 weeks, maintaining videos becomes basically a full-time job that nobody had time for because the even hadn't like a dedicated person for that. So product owners were doing videos, and we all can agree that it's not a top priority task when you are a product owner. You have a product to build, and we're recording videos. Like you just don't have time for that. So we did a written documentation when it's modular and well structured is just dramatically easier to update, especially if you have a technical writer. So like change a screenshot, update the procedure, publish. And the article is just there in minutes, updated one. So that modularity also made it far better suited for the case. Because like a well-scoped article is exactly the kind of piece for AI assistant it can work with, right? And once we had a working written knowledge base, we integrated with the AI assistant. And the difference actually was visible almost immediately. So users could get accurate answers without like hesitating between what a human agent would say and what the AI said, because they were both drawing from the same source of truth. And the support team got fewer repetitive tasks. And then AI had something reliable to work with, right? Our documentation. So the lesson I took from that project wasn't just write documentation. It was documentation is infrastructure, is part of the system. So it's not just a nice to have alongside AI. It's actually the foundation AI runs on. And when that foundation isn't there or like isn't solid, the AI fails. And no matter how good the model you use is. Now let's get practical. So I want to give you something you can actually use like next week. I think of this as a quick AI readiness audit. So 5 tests you can run on any piece of documentation to assess whether it's ready to serve as a knowledge source for an AI assistant. So test 1, the topic test. Does your article answers exactly one question? If you read the title and the article answers a different question, or like 3 questions, it needs some rework. AI retrieval works best when content is style is good. So ask yourself, if someone searched for this specific title, would the article give them what they expected and like nothing more? Then test 2, the terminology test. So pick a key term from the article, a feature name, a concept, or a button label, and then search your knowledge base for every other article that mentions it. Is it called the same thing everywhere? Like if your products call it workplace, for example, in one place, and then project in another, you have a retrieval problem waiting to happen. Your AI will hallucinate. So in this case, consistency isn't just style, it's functionality. Then the next one is context text. Read your article as if you knew nothing about the product. Could you understand and follow it without like reading anything else first? No section about. And if your answer is no, if it relies on some assumed knowledge or references to something without explaining it, the AI will retrieve it and answer it just generating some incomplete text, right? It will not fill the gaps for you. It will just generate it as it is. So, test 4 is the retrieval test. Look again at your article title and its main headings. Do they reflect the actual question a user would ask? Do they reflect the way your users and not the product or development team think of a feature? Like, for example, user provisioning configuration is how an engineer would think about it. And how do I add a new user to the product is how your customers ask about it, your AI. So align your titles to the user's language and not just to product taxonomy. And the final one is the coverage test. This one actually requires your AI assistant, if you have any, like embedded in the knowledge bases, for example, Eddie AI is a chatbot, right, in Document360. Then look at the question it getting wrong and the queries where it says it doesn't know. Those gaps are not model problems that are your documentation gaps. So the AI is telling you exactly what is missing. And that's actually a very valuable sign because that's treated as a content audit. So you don't need actually to run this audit on your entire knowledge base at once. No, that's just a lot of work. But you have to start with your like top 20% by traffic, articles that users visit most. And so for the ones that AI will retrieve most often, right? Fix those first, because there is a small thing that might surprise you. You can even use your AI assistant to help you with the audit itself. Like ask it to identify articles with inconsistent terminology. Ask it to flag articles that seem to require some complex or topics understanding or some context and they don't provide. So AI is actually quite good at finding the structural problems in your documentation, which might sound ironic, but genuinely it's pretty useful. So I also want to zoom in for a moment because I think there is like a bigger trend worth naming and one that makes everything we just talked about even more urgent. So, the general trend is that support is going agentic. And what does it mean for us? Like, for a long time, AI in support and chatbots or AI search. A user asks a question, the AI finds a relevant article, chatbot generates a summary, so that's reactive. It's retrieval, it's useful. But what's happening now and actually accelerating super quickly is that AI agents are starting to do things. Not just like answer questions, but take actions. Handle the entire L1 support interaction end to end without like any human agent involved. And this is already happening. And for L1 support, the repetitive, high volume, rule based interactions is going to become like a norm faster than most of the organization we expect. So now here what gets overlooked in almost every conversation I see about agentic AI. Everyone is focused on the agent itself, the model, the orchestration, the tool integration, the workflow design. And all of that is real and important. But the question is, what is the agent reading when it decides what to do? And it's reading your documentation, your knowledge base, your procedures, your policies, troubleshooting guides. And if it's not there, it's gonna fail. The agent is only as good as the knowledge it acts on. So an agentic AI that reads like a poorly structured knowledge base will make inconsistent decisions. And will apply a wrong procedure. It will escalate when it should resolve or resolve an issue when it should escalate. So it will give users like different answers depending which article it happened to read. And here documentation quality always mattered for self-service or like for human agents. But when the agent is AI, when it's making decisions autonomously at scale, like the risks are different, the errors compound, and the cost of mistake might be just too high. So if your organization is moving toward agentic support, and I encourage you to assume that it is because like the momentum is real. The time to build your documentation foundation is now, right now, not after you deploy the agent and started seeing values, but now. Technical writers are often like the last people in the room when this AI project gets coded. We are brought in the very end to document the thing. And I'd like to see us in the room at the very beginning because we understand knowledge architecture in the way that most people building those systems don't. And there is opportunity, and we should take it. I think we should take it.
And that's a wrap for today's session. Once again, thanks a lot to you for walking us through the topic. To everyone who tuned in, thank you for taking your time to be here. And of course, if you have more questions or want to learn more about Document 360, then feel free to reach out to us. We'll be back soon with another session. Until then, see you next time. Thank you, Maria. Have a nice day, and thank you everyone for joining.